One of the biggest storylines in the NFL this season has been Tua Tagovailoa. He is currently back playing after suffering another scary concussion earlier in the season. The discussion around Tua has mainly been critical of him and the Dolphins for not stepping in and saying, hey, Tua, it's probably time to retire. This is pretty much the consensus amongst fans, media, even current and former NFL players. Everybody telling Tua, hey, you had a great career. It's probably time to retire for your long-term health. I understand why he wouldn't want to, and I understand why the Dolphins wouldn't want to. I really disagree with it, but that's been a really big storyline this season in the NFL. Now, this video isn't really going to be about Tua and his situation. It's going to be more about the NFL as a whole, right? This situation really just got me thinking, is the NFL player safety movement, is that making any impact at all? Or is it all just a PR push from the NFL that's kind of hiding behind smoke and mirrors? So this video, there's really going to be 3 sections that we talk about where the NFL is trying to improve. The first is going to be the equipment. The second are going to be the processes that the NFL has put in place. And the third are going to be the rule changes that the NFL has made over the past few years. First things first, the NFL is probably objectively safer now than it was even 10 years ago. And to prove my point, I'm going to show you some highlights from the 2010s that just would not be allowed to happen today. Look, this stuff is awesome, and as a fan, I love it, but I understand why the NFL has made some of the changes that they've made. The question is, has it changed too much? That's the debate around the NFL currently, is how do you make the game safer without watering the game down too much? So recently, I just saw a picture of myself playing Pop Warner football. This is probably like 2007. And there's no way that in 2024, if I had the same helmet that I had in that picture, I'd be even allowed to play today. Helmet engineering and design have come so far in the last 10 to 15 years, it's insane. They're made with different styles, they're made with different products. The engineering behind them is really night and day, even from when I was a kid. Players also now wear custom fitted helmets, and they use helmets that are specifically designed for their position. Guys like George Kittle and Nick Bosa come to mind when I think of these new custom position specific helmets, but even Patrick Mahomes has a custom helmet that is designed for quarterbacks. New helmets also have sensors in them to where the manufacturers can track data to make them safer along the way. Another point about equipment being better, and something that's got a lot of attention this year, even in the national media, has been the use of Guardian caps. So Guardian caps have been mandated in practices for a while now. Offensive and defensive linemen especially have been using them for years. Over the past few years, and especially this year, the usage has been mandated for basically the entire team. According to the Guardian Caps website, there were fewer concussions this year than there have been in any year since they started tracking in 2015, and this is preseason numbers. They said that there's nearly a 50% reduction in concussions among players who are wearing the Guardian Cap in mandated sessions versus the pre-mandated average. Now, again, players are open about the Guardian Caps not looking all that cool, but it feels like more and more are beginning to wear it and come around on the idea of safety over swag. The final part of my equipment point isn't really equipment, but it's not a process and it's not a rule either, so I'm going to include it, and that's turf. Players and fans alike hate turf, and I completely understand why. The NFL and NFLPA have tracked injury data for years, comparing injuries on natural grass fields to the ones that happen on turf. Consistently, the data has shown that lower body injuries are more common on turf fields than they are on grass fields. Some of these studies actually showed that something as serious as an ACL tear is reportedly about 67% more likely to occur on turf than it is on grass. In recent data, in 2021 and 2022, non-contact injuries on turf were 20% higher than they were on grass. The NFLPA has been an advocate of mandating grass fields for a while now, and it's got a lot of support from the players and fans as well. The big pushback is coming from NFL and NFL owners of mixed-use stadiums. The NFL doesn't want to have a non-NFL event destroy the field and then have to send the NFL team out there the next day. Turf is clearly a huge issue, though, and I only expect this to become a bigger problem between the NFL and NFLPA. So the second part of things that I want to look at are the new processes that the NFL has in place regarding injuries. The NFL now has spotters at games looking for players who could potentially be concussed, and they have independent neurologists on the sidelines. Now, this seems great, but a lot of the times when watching a game, we see a guy who is probably concussed make his way back out there, and I'm looking directly at you when I say that, Tua. But the neurologists and team staff are now being given more specific no-go signs to look for when a player may be concussed. Some of these signs are loss of consciousness, impact seizure, tonic posturing, gross motor instability, and ataxia. These are signs that everyone on the sideline is supposed to be looking for, and if you see them, you're not supposed to let a player back out there. This has come a long way from just asking someone where they're at, do they remember their name, and giving them some smelling salts only to send them back out there when they don't remember even talking to you in the first place. The NFL actually now reviews weekly team injury data. They also make sure that players are following the correct concussion protocol as well, versus years past where there wasn't a real system in place to standardize how you know when and if a player can come back from injuries. It's literally called the accountability program. Now, these processes are unfortunately in place because in the past, both teams and players rushed to get back out there only to cause more harm to themselves and more harm to the franchises as well. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was rule changes that have come about over the past few years. The rule changes that have been made over the past few years are some of the most hotly debated things that are going on in the NFL conversation. I know personally, I've lost my shit watching some of the roughing the passer calls that get called. And I also get mad because Cam Newton never got those calls, and I'm in Charlotte, and I had to watch that shit, and it just pisses me off to this day. But that's neither here nor there. Contact and practices in the offseason has been reduced drastically by rule changes, and that's one rule that I think the players are probably supporting overwhelmingly. So here's a list of rule changes that I found. It's not even all of them. There were rule changes made to lowering the helmet to initiate contact, expanding roughing the passer protections, ending blindside blocks, changing rules to the kickoffs, no running start on any kickoffs, expanding the unnecessary roughness guidelines, no chop blocks, no hip drop tackles. These are all rules that have been put into place fairly recently, and if I show you some of the best highlights of the NFL over the past 20 years, those highlights are going to include people breaking these new rules. Nobody wants to watch sarcasticball, but as we learn more about player injuries and what they're doing for long-term health, it's understandable why the NFL implements rule changes like this, especially since for so long they denied and covered up the connection between head trauma and the game. That's another video for another time. So are all these things actually working? Well, the answer is sorta. Like I mentioned earlier, concussions were down in the 2024 preseason, and they were the lowest since they started tracking in 2015. The data shows that concussions peaked in 2017 and steadily have been falling every year. And I think that's a good thing, but again, I don't think we'll ever be able to fully remove concussions from such a violent sport like football. Lower body injuries are also reportedly down, and this is something that I do think the rule changes have had something to do with. Strains and ACL tears are becoming less frequent, and when they do happen, surgeries have come so far to where injuries that used to end careers, like Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers' Achilles tear, are now only ending seasons. The NFL is clearly pushing the player safety agenda, and the NFLPA definitely wants them to keep improving as well. My takeaway from looking at a lot of the data that I found and a lot of the research was that yes, a lot of the things that are being put into place are making slight impacts, but at the end of the day, it's going to be really hard to make drastic sweeping changes to the NFL because players are getting bigger, faster, stronger, and the nature of the NFL is just too violent to ever truly curb player injuries. Let me know in the comments if you think there's anything else the NFL can do to make it safer without ruining how fun it is to watch football. And if you're still watching, thanks, hit like, hit subscribe.